Akita, seeing her in that state, begged her to stop. He asked her to look at his hand, which was now injured, and also questioned whether she truly wanted to eliminate him. But Rikudu responded by asking what he was talking about, since he had informed her that they were going to train, and then inquired if they could continue. Akita, upon hearing that, reflected that convincing her would be impossible. He told himself that she had always been like that, and no matter how absurd it seemed, the weak could not challenge the strong. Therefore, there seemed to be no other alternative. At that moment, Akita stood up, raising his guard. He remembered when she said it wouldn't work to attack her without the intention to eliminate her. So he believed he had to go all out against her, otherwise he could not escape. However, he observed her carefully as she was now armed with a knife. He urged his mind to think about what to do, knowing he lacked the skill and experience to defend against it. Moreover, his hand hurt too much. Yet even so, he had few options left and would have to wait for a better opportunity to counterattack. Normally, one doesn't know what might happen, whether punches or kicks. If you knew what awaited you, the situation would be different, since you would only need to dodge the opponent's attack and maintain defense, even if the technique wasn't perfect. But with a knife, the scenario changed completely as the attack came from the blade. With that thought fixed in his mind, Akita prepared himself, convinced he could do it. At that moment, Rikudu attacked. Unfortunately, a knife had two advantages. The first was its offensive power. Just then, the girl struck another cut, since even the slightest touch could wound the opponent. That is, even without applying force to the blade, it could cause harm. However, for Akita, that meant nothing, and he assured that he was fine. When Rikudu lunged again, the young man prepared himself. But unfortunately, the second advantage of the knife was its presence. If one were struck by that weapon, they could lose their life, and its mere image or the fear it caused was enough to halt any counterattack attempt. That is why someone without proper training could not even move in front of a knife. And that was exactly what happened to Akita, causing him another wound. Immediately, the young man screamed in pain. That made Rikudu declare that he was pathetic, that in the end he got hurt for not moving, and if he had managed to dodge, she would have congratulated him. She mentioned that he was like a frog paralyzed in front of a snake with no choice but to become prey. That was his current situation, completely useless. But then the young man asked her not to be so arrogant, cursing her in the process. Hearing this, Rikudo looked at him and asked where he got that courage and if he had a plan. Or maybe he was more confident now because he also supposedly had a weapon. As he stood up, Akita replied that he didn't know, but he was fed up with the way she did things and exhausted by it all. He prepared to fight, declaring that now he would show what that frog could do. Thus, both were armed, and in front of Akita was a woman with a knife who had already stabbed and cut him 3 times. Even so, the young man wondered why such an abnormal situation calmed him instead of agitating him, revealing that, in reality, his thoughts had turned violent. Then Rikudu asked if he could move his right arm. Immediately, with a smile, he affirmed that if it was just a damaged muscle, it would heal soon, assuring that he would be fine. But Akita thought it was as expected, and that there was no choice but to continue. He knew she was overwhelmingly superior in combat, perhaps even a genius, but she was used to more than that. She was beyond imagination. After exchanging cold stares, Akita began to act. His plan was to throw his object as a projectile. He knew using his supposed only weapon in that way was an absurd strategy, and it would be great if it hit. But if she avoided it, he would just lose what he had to protect himself. However, if the goal was to force her to dodge, the situation was different. At that moment, after throwing the dumbbell at Rikudu's face without really expecting to hit her, he only wanted to gain time to do one thing: escape, since that was the most sensible choice. In the end, there was no need to try to defeat someone stronger, as resisting the impulse to resort to violence was the most rational solution. But Rikudo called him an idiot. Upon reaching the door, Akita realized it was locked. The young man thought that, of course, it was a normal lock and could be opened quickly, but by doing so, his roommate would have already reached him. He assumed that someone accustomed to fights would have anticipated this as expected. But before she could reach him, the young man activated his phone flashlight, blinding his pursuer for a moment. At that moment, Akita thought he had already considered that the door would be locked and that he needed a second to open it, so he had prepared the phone in advance. However, Rikudu did not move, and while Akita opened the door, she waited, determined to catch him as soon as she regained sight. But upon opening her eyes, she found her companion preparing an attack. He had unlocked the door to make her believe he was escaping, besides pretending that he could not move his right arm. Thus, he managed to land a precise blow on Rikudu's face, causing her to fall. At that moment, Akita's violence surpassed hers, making his fist kiss his companion's face.